This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Grief, BeLIEF. And it's been a couple months since we've been on, and grief doesn't take a holiday. Now, some of us took a holiday. Some of us have taken some just time off because we needed to recoup. But I've been talking to a number of people recently who have said, why aren't I having fun? I'm hurting, I'm grieving, and grieving about just about anything. My husband, 3 weeks ago, right before Christmas, he's a contract worker, and he saw people in the company who have been there 20, 25, and 30 years being let go the day before Christmas break. And he started grieving for them. And I could feel it, it was difficult for him to go back to work after the holidays. It was like, yes, he wants his job, he needs his job, but what about these people who are no longer having their jobs? And how does he fill in for them? So grief is not just about the loss of a spouse, a sibling, a parent, a child, a best friend. It can be just about anything. And today, Carol is going to lead us. And Carol, give everybody a little bit of background about, your part in the grief cycle and what made you decide to even start in this area, especially because that's not where you started when you got out of college.
Interesting that you're asking me those questions, because those are some of the questions that I'm going to be asking you to expound on. But before we do get started, I do want to acknowledge this is an extremely hard time of the year for people. Notoriously, holidays are a hard time for people with depression and lack of family or not feeling belonging and the loneliness that people experience. So my heart goes out to your husband in dealing with that. Thank God he has you to be his soundboard and be there to help support him. Before we continue, though, I do want to wish everyone a happy, healthy new year. It's been a tough year, and I don't see next year being much easier at this point. And my heart goes out to those that are grieving. We see a lot of grief going on in the world around us. And I hope that our show helps people be a little bit more compassionate and understanding towards one another, in opening up and letting them know that we are here to listen and to be there to help guide them. And Karen, you asked me how I got involved in it. I guess I really did early on, not only after college, but in high school, when a very dear friend of mine lost her cousin, and I did not know how to react to it. I was devastated for her, but I didn't know how to even approach the subject with her. And then since then have experienced the loss of many near and dear people, leading up to my husband 13 years ago, and that hit me harder than anything. Because of that, I became a bereavement coach and have gone into the end of life doula work, which means that I'm working not only with the individual that is grieving, but individuals that know that they are in the final stages of their life, and working with the family and trying to bring them together to hear one another, because we all come with an agenda. We don't necessarily listen to those that are immediately impacted, meaning the individual that knows that they are towards the end of their life. And how do you share that with others and get others to respect one another? But what I would like to do tonight is have Karen share with us how and why she got involved, what brought her into grief BeLIEF, and then what her journey has been in just being with us, and then even recognizing herself that she was grieving and how she has been dealing with that. So I will turn it over to you, Karen, and let you begin with how you even got involved with us to begin with.
Well, it started way before I read Carol's post on uh, Facebook. In 2016, I got a phone call that my mother had a stroke, was in the hospital. We should get up to Michigan as quickly as possible. And I was the closest one to get there between my siblings and myself. And we got up there, and weirdly enough, on our way up there, we got in a car accident. Nothing horrible, but just enough to detain us, to get my mind going in all weird ways. And my husband was sitting in the back seat, and he actually got hurt. So now I'm concerned about him, but I'm running to Michigan because my mother had a stroke and nobody's giving me any information. And when we got there, I didn't know who to tend to. Do I tend to my husband? Am I there for my mother? But I'm hurting right now because I'm feeling torn. And that's when I started to realize that I didn't know how to grieve. I just knew how to keep going. And that's what I started doing. And I did that the whole time my mother was ill and was actually in the last stages of her life. I just kept doing. I knew in the back of my mind she was dying. I knew I was hurting. But I didn't allow myself to talk about it. And after she passed away, I am very grateful to my two brothers and my family who brought humor into her passing. That she was 96 and a half years old, but she really wasn't, because she was a leap year baby. And if she had lived long enough, she would have made, year 25. And they just kept going on and on. And so for weeks, I still had laughter because I could remember all these great things. And then all of a sudden one day, it was like, I shouldn't be laughing. I thought I should be crying. I thought I should be hurting. And I
Guilt
kept,
of laughing, the guilt of enjoying.
absolutely, absolutely. And I didn't like the fact at that point that we could say, well, she lived 96 and a half years, what a great life. And it was like, well, it was, but all of a sudden I needed my mom. I felt like an orphan. My dad had passed away 14 years before that. And, I still had my mom and I was there for her. And so I didn't feel his direct loss until I lost my mom. And so I was podcasting at the time, and I have a very good friend up in Michigan who was helping me through some of this. She's a psychologist, and we started doing, a bi-monthly podcast. We were talking a little bit about grief, but not exactly. But it was sort of, I felt it like I was healing. I thought everything was okay. But a little over a year ago, I started grieving over a relationship. It wasn't a death. At least at the time it wasn't. And then I read your Facebook post, Carol, that talked about your grief and what you had been through. And it's like, I knew this girl. We went to high school together. I didn't realize what you had gone through, even though we had reconnected on Facebook and I had read tons of posts. It was this post that said, oh my God, I don't really know her. And how can I help? And so I reached out to you and I said, let's do a podcast. And you right away said, absolutely. And you came on and we did a podcast, and I knew it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me And I had a feeling that you could add more to the world if we continued on. And right after that, I met Allison on Podmatch, and I had her on, and I'm sitting going, oh my God, these are two women who don't even know each other. They've never met, and your stories were almost identical when you talked about the last days of life and grief. And I saw your stories being even bigger than that. It wasn't just about your spouse, but it's about what people expected of you because you were hurting. And how everybody either wanted to save you and protect you, or they walked away because they didn't want to catch what you had.
Mhm.
And I hear those words. I met Christy through another group, and it was interesting because in that group, she kept mentioning grief, and that's not what the group really was about. And it was like, I'm missing something here. You know, and I was feeling her hurt, but I didn't know what her hurt was at the time. And we finally reached out, we talked to each other, and we realized how much we had in common. And she started, I felt like I was healing when I was talking to you, Christy. It was just your mannerisms. And then when we did the grief recovery, it was like I opened up in a way that I didn't think I would. And it helps me on a daily basis. You know, we were talking before we came on that, you know, we all have an acquaintance who's going through a tough time right now. And my heart goes out. I'm grieving for the tough time that that person is having. And I think it's important to our audience to understand that every day is not sunshine and roses, but we can find a little bit of sunshine and roses in the day. And that's what you all have taught me. And I'm grateful. And that's what led me to saying, hey, let's all come together. Let's do this. Let's invite other people on to share their stories. And I thought about it a lot in December when we didn't have the show, thinking, I'm hoping that we gave somebody a hand to get through the holidays. I was hoping that there was something out there that maybe they had heard or seen, or maybe they had contacted one of you. If we could help just one person, we've come a long way. That's my
I think
story.
from listening to you, and I'd like to expound a little bit more on some of your experience, but hopefully what we have given to our audience is the ability to give themselves permission to talk about it. So many people are afraid to talk about it or are not received well. And just being there, just letting someone talk about it is so extremely helpful. We have all grieved in some form or another. And so being able to find that individual that you can share that with and know that they will listen and not sit in judgment of you is extremely helpful. Could you, though, help us a little bit on your journey in working with Christy and how her method has helped you and why you feel it has helped you? Because we all come from a little bit of a different angle in how we work with our clients. And I think it's important for people to understand that they're not one size fits all, that there are many, many options out there. There are many similarities in how we work with our clients, but I'd really like you to help express how working with Christy has helped you.
You know, the interesting part is I went in on my end knowing that she was my friend. And so at first I wasn't sure that this was going to be helpful, but I wanted to experience it. But there's just something about her demeanor when she explained what we were going to be doing, when she told me that our conversations were just between the two of us, that there was no right, there was no wrong, there was no judgment. And I didn't always do things the way that her program recommends you do things. Her program actually recommends that you use paper and pen and write out your thoughts, write out your stories, whatever they are. I can't do that anymore. It's not that I'm not capable, but my brain goes right to the computer. And so I just said to her, this is how I'm going to do it. No judgment. She explained to me why pen to paper in theory has a, better connection. And I said, well, that's great. I would try it. And on the second session that we went through, I tried it and I crumbled it up and threw it away and started on the computer. But what I found was when she shared her stories, it allowed me to open up more. And the first time I didn't even do it about somebody who had passed. I have all these years been grieving over my divorce that happened in 1980. I wasn't giving it up. I was holding on to it, even though my ex-husband and I have become pleasant when we're around each other. I still felt like I hadn't completed the cycle. And I did complete the cycle. And even though we don't always get to share those stories with anybody, I actually shared it with him right before the holidays. He just became a grandfather, and he was so elated that there was no hate anymore, no guilt anymore. And he told me that it helped him get rid of the guilt. So the two of us have been harboring it. We've been harboring guilt and grief. So what I like about her program, it's 6 weeks and it is intense. And Christy, when you told me that day one, I thought, this is this is easy. And it wasn't. And I knew that it's not a program that you can lie to your coach about. I mean, I've been through therapy and I've told therapists things that I walk out and go, boy, they really believed me, didn't they? But I couldn't do that because I knew I wanted to heal. And the same thing when I did my second session around my mom, I just never had really said goodbye. And as I told Kirsty, I don't want to say goodbye, that I'm never going to think about you, that I'm not going to look up at the heavens and talk to you. But I wanted to say goodbye to any of the ill will that I may have had over the years. And that was refreshing.
That's what we do. It's never goodbye to the relationship, because whether that person is alive or not alive, you have that relationship for the rest of your life. And we want to keep it as healthy as we possibly can. So we are saying goodbye to the relationship, to the pain, the loss, the loneliness, the isolation, not to the relationship.
And realizing your heart is large enough to bring in more. You can hold on to that love in a very positive manner, but there's also room to love again.
Absolutely.
Different relationships, whether, it's a friendship or a marriage or just a companion or a job. We are capable of that. And to Christy's point, it's very important that you realize that. To your point, the willingness to heal, I think that is first and foremost. Many of us are blocked and not able to heal for quite a while. And once you start melting and you're able to heal, that's when things start coming together and you are able to move on and move forward. And you never let go. You never let go. That woman will always be a part of your life.
Right.
Absolutely.
I was thinking as you were speaking about in the healing process, you're able to call back the parts of yourself that you gave away.
Yeah.
In the grief. And so you're actually calling back a piece of who you are that you gave away. And I think that that's a pretty profound part of what healing is. It's, I am now more whole because I have healed this relationship. And the other person is more whole as well, whether or not you ever talk to them again.
But the beauty is they did share some of those moments together and help each other heal. So it comes back again in my mind, the importance of communicating and expressing your feelings and where you are in a very positive manner to that other person, so you can both move on and heal and have a relationship.
Well, and I have found that it helps me in my daily life. It is when I started noticing it, I kept thinking like, what's wrong with me? But I find that if something starts to upset me or I start grieving, and one example is Christy and I belong to a group and we do a lot of sharing. And occasionally one of the group members will talk about something personal and I start grieving for them. I just like, but I now have this sense, okay, I can feel, okay, I can't take it away from them. But I'm trying to understand it and understand why is it affecting me at this moment in time.
And why is it, do you think?
Well, I know I've always been the type of person that, well, my parents used to say that I was Sarah Bernhardt. I was so sensitive and dramatic. But I believe that I want to feel good and I want everybody else around me to feel good.
Well, you're empathetic. You're definitely empathetic.
But I know that it can't happen 24/7. And
Knowing your boundaries.
right. So there are times when I just get so caught up in it. And I go back and almost in my mind, I write that letter, even if it's to myself, telling myself, it's okay, but you don't have to feel this way. Okay. It's okay, to care about somebody else, but you need to care about yourself right now. What can you do?
Isn't that true? The importance of taking ownership of yourself, not putting the blame and the anger on someone else, even no matter what type of grief you're going through, and realizing that you need to take the ownership of what's going on and how do you learn to cope with that pain or cope with that loss or cope with the tomorrow that's going to be presented, and how do you do it in a way that is healthy? And is it writing that letter that you never deliver, or is it drawing, or is it allowing yourself to cry, or is it just going out and yelling at the tree and getting that anger out of your system, or is it going back and figuring out exactly where this anger came from and why? And how do you as an individual turn it around?
Yeah.
I was thinking about how you are with other people and your empathy for other people, and also the power of personal stories. You and Christy shared personal stories, and you share personal stories, and the power of personal stories in interacting with another person because you know the gift of going through the grief. And your personal story is a gift that can share that.
Again,
you
the
know-
importance of communicating or being able to talk to someone. I know in high school, I experienced a lot of traumatic incidents in the family life. Had I known I could share that with some of my classmates, probably would have been extremely helpful at the time, and didn't realize it until I was much older that some of them too were going through some very traumatic times. But you didn't share those things.
Right.
You kept it to yourself. And, talking to a counselor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, let alone a coach, was taboo. So we didn't have the coping skills. There was a lot that happened with no coping skills. And how do you get beyond that as you start growing and get into relationships when you're harboring all of that,
Right.
not knowing how to heal and get beyond it? So, you asked me how I got into this. It was finally realizing that it's okay to talk about it. And guess what? There are other people that have experienced something similar. And as much as you don't want to be part of this sorority, you are.
Well, life throws us obstacles. And if we take those obstacles and challenge ourselves to get through them, we're much stronger. But I know probably for the first 50, maybe 55 years of my life, they were obstacles. My father would tell me I could do anything I wanted. But when that obstacle was there, it was like, I don't know how to get around it. And he wasn't there to tell me, because he would just say, well, you can do it. And that would upset me even more, because can you just give me a hint? Can you, give me some ideas? But he never did. But just about the time I turned 50, my youngest son was, going through a lot of terrible things at school. He was being bullied horribly. And all of a sudden I found my voice. It was like, you're not going to do that to him, but I'm not going to be this overprotective mother either. I'm going to deliver my words so that people will hear them, that don't let your child be bullied. Don't you be bullied. And that's how I got into podcasting, because it was like, I needed somebody to tell me, but now I had the voice to tell you. And I sort of think that's how some of you got into your practice of grief coaching. It wasn't a chosen field, but you were hurting. And how do I share my hurt, but in a positive manner?
I think we can all agree it chose us. And we embraced it. Because we knew what the depth of pain did to us. And how we got through it. And we got through it with individuals like yourself, like Christy, like Allison, like Candace, who's not here tonight. Unfortunately, she has other things that she's doing. But if you look at it and the world today, this is something that people are embracing. Anderson Cooper has a wonderful podcast.
Absolutely.
Yes. And people are now learning, especially in the world that where we've become so solipsistic. And we've become so in tune to the computer and finding everything on the computer, but not socializing the way that we used to. We are human beings. We are animals that crave companionship. And so this is part of that. This is part of letting people know that, you're not alone in this. There are others. We are here. We are here to hear you. We are here to be there for you and with you and help guide you.
Allison, you just moved not too long ago, in the last couple months. And not only did you move physical locations, but you're with a very special person in your life now. And I'm sure there was once a time over the last many years that you probably thought, you know, I'm the widow and that's who I'm going to be. And I love how you go by Allison, also known as Black Widow. And I want people to know she's dynamite. So, but how did you get through the fact that it's okay to go meet somebody else? It's okay to continue on with my life.
Yeah, the grief around meeting my boyfriend was deeper than anything I had experienced. I mean, moving recently was tough. I threw out the couch that my husband died on 3 months ago, and he died in 2016. But the grief, I felt so guilty for wanting to love somebody else, and so guilty for not. I truly understood the sort of Indian cast the woman into the grave with the husband. And I thought that was completely barbaric. And then right after my husband died, I was like, okay, still think that's pretty awful, but I get it. Because I couldn't imagine having an intimate relationship with another person ever again.
Or even taking a step forward without
Yep.
him on your side.
Yep. And yet I had lots of female friends. I had not a lot of male friends. And I started really missing having male energy in my life. And so I decided I was going to go on one of the dating apps. And I was going to try. And I had been with the same man for 25 years. So I didn't actually know who I was, what I wanted, what kind of man I was interested in. And so I used the dating app itself as a sift and sort strategy. So I would look at the profiles and I would go, okay, well, I like this, I don't like that. And I would use the text conversations to figure out what kind of conversations I was interested in. If someone was mean, they were an automatic out. Unkindness. So I began to discover what really mattered to me in my next person. But even though these dating apps are meant to only show you people who are close to you, the only people that I reached out to who reached back out to me were 4 hours away. And so I knew that I was getting closer to ready when they were an hour away.
I love that.
And so then finally I was willing to actually meet somebody because I was terrified. I mean, the last time I dated, I was in my 30s. I was now in my 50s. It didn't look the same. I didn't have the same level of confidence. Nothing. And I just saw it, Carol, you've been talking a lot about communication. I really saw it as kind of an ongoing communication. Okay, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start doing things I like with people who like doing the same things, who are male. And I'm going to see what happens. But I couldn't imagine intimacy with another person. I couldn't be touched. I would say, don't touch me, get away, if it was a particular day. And so the man that I wound up with, I wound up doing a lot of open, honest, really vulnerable communication. Because it wasn't fair to me, to him, when I was shoving him away because my husband was dead and I couldn't imagine being intimate with another person ever again. And so when I would have these visceral reactions, I would explain. And there were times it felt shameful to explain. Yes, I know he's dead. And yes, my head knows that's true. And my heart doesn't know that, hasn't quite caught up yet. And I would not be with this man if he was not immensely patient. Immensely patient. And we just went back and forth. And I had this game plan. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do light dating for 2 years. This is the plan.
Yeah, heart, don't get involved.
Didn't work out. This particular guy that I am with now totally blew my game plan. And it freaked me out because I was like, I am not ready for this. I can't do this. I mean, I can't do this. But I had to try. I had to be willing to try. And so we went to Tarrytown for the weekend. And I didn't know if I could ever be intimate with another person in my life. And so I had red spotted Old Navy pajamas. And I was like, this may be all you see. Like you could see my hands and my ankles and my head in this
I
thing.
love it.
And I cried for the entire weekend off and on. And I freaked out for the entire weekend off and on. And each time I said, stop. And we would go for a walk, go get something to eat. But willingness, you were talking about willingness. You have to be willing to heal. And so to be willing to be with someone, to be willing to love someone else, took being willing to shove my way through the grief and to be okay with the fact that love and desire and grief rose up at the same time. But it was a really permanent saying goodbye to my husband, more permanent than his dying, being willing to love again. Yeah.
Why did you feel it was a permanent goodbye to your husband?
It was, so I loved my husband, love the life we have, love him still as my husband. And that won't end, but I needed to make a space for another person.
I just wanted you to clarify that, because it's
Yeah.
not that you let go of your husband, that you no longer love him. It's
No.
that you opened up the space to allow someone in.
But if all of me was taken up by my husband, then there was no room for anybody else.
Right.
Right.
Which is why, when we moved, throwing out the couch that my husband died on was a big, big deal. We live now in a place where my husband never set foot. And I've never done that before.
You're on a new journey with a new companion.
I am. Yeah.
And you
That's fair.
looked, and obviously you looked for that person that was going to allow you to communicate and listen, and then he could communicate with you. And that's really important, for many years, if somebody would have asked me what I wanted in
Mhm.
life, it usually was, well, I want, my husband to be happy. I want my kids to be happy. I want my parents to be well. And I wrote about it the other day. It's
On your
only,
computer.
yeah, on the computer. Yeah, it's only probably within the last 10 years that I stop myself and say, hey, I need to be happy. It doesn't mean I have to give up these other people in my life, but it means that if I'm not happy, they certainly are picking up on that. And, my youngest son told me that right before he moved away. He said, I want you to know I'm not moving because of you, which I didn't really think he was, but anyways, but he made it a point, I'm not moving because of you. I'm moving because I need to, and this is going to be good for you. And as I saw him drive away that day, I thought, you're crazy. It's not good for me, as I, grieved over him. But like within a couple of days, I have to admit, it was like, this is the cycle of life. I didn't lose him, but there was that grief period where you say, hey, what about me? And he reminded me of that when he settled down in Texas. He called me up and he said, so what are you doing today? And it was like, wow, I don't think you've ever asked me that question before. And so now I make sure that every day there's at least something that I can reflect on that's for me. And it seems like that's what you went through too, Allison, but it took time.
And there is no time frame on it. Everyone goes at their own pace, but you hit a very important point, is that we need to be okay with ourselves. Nobody else is going to make us okay. Thinking that, a lot of people think, well, I need to be in a relationship to be happy, or I need to have a child to be happy, or I need to have this job to be happy. You need to be okay with yourself. Once you're okay with yourself, maybe you will find that job that does make you happy, but it's because you're okay in your own skin. And maybe you will find that person that you can be a companion with, because it's okay. You're okay. And the communication, again, is so important. Christy, we haven't heard a real lot from you. Do you want to jump in here? Good, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, what do I say? No, I'm just taking it all in. Allison, I first of all want to just say, like, thank you so much for sharing that. To be honest, it's something I've wondered about. Like, how do you go from, losing a spouse that you were with for so long to getting to the point where you're comfortable with the idea of possibly letting somebody else in? And I appreciate you sharing that and being so honest and open about it. And I don't know. I'm learning a lot as I'm listening to you all. Yeah. So I'll jump in if I think of anything.
I'll go back to Luke for a second, because I experienced the same thing when I got into a relationship. And the first time he told me he loved me, I said, you don't get to say that. I'm still in love with my husband. I was so not ready for him to be in my life, and was so thankful that he was so incredibly patient and understanding and giving. So totally relate to what you're saying, including the pajamas. But again, it's being okay with yourself and coping with the depth of pain, knowing that you still have plenty of life and love in you, and letting that bubble up and become part of your persona, but being able to communicate. And there are still moments in time when, I need a little space today. Today would have been his birthday or something. Or will you celebrate this with me? Because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't know you. And that became a very turning point for me too. That if I hadn't lost Ron, I wouldn't have met the individual that I'm involved with. And so I'm thankful for that too. And going to a psychic, and at this point we weren't seeing each other because, again, I couldn't handle it. It was just, I wasn't ready. And the psychic was saying to me that as much as Ron didn't like my boyfriend, he was so happy that he made me happy. And going, but we're not together. And he goes, oh, yes, you are. So this growth and going through all these different phases and stages, and there's not an order to that. And you may skip a few, or you may jump forward and go back and whatever. It's a journey. but it's a journey of getting to know who you are in this life, that you are still here and you're still living. How do you find joy and comfort in it? And the way you find it is within yourself first. And part of that is sharing and communicating with others and letting them know, this moment in time, I'm hurting. This moment in time, I'm really enjoying this company or this conversation. It's opening up and communicating. That's my 2 cents worth.
Oh, and you know, I find that that is what my relationship is with my husband. Is that, I mean, I totally understand some of the things that Allison was talking about, can I be with this person? When I met my husband, I was a year and a half divorced at that point. And yes, I wanted to find somebody because I thought I had to. But he wasn't what I was looking for. Never was. Even today, when I look at him, I go, we ended up together? How'd that happen?
Don't
but-
tell him.
But yeah, but we still have to have,
This episode.
right. But we still have to have these deep conversations. There are times he'll say to me, I don't understand some of your podcasts. Why do you have to do that? And I said, I don't always have to have a why. If it feels right.
Exactly.
And, but he's a different type person. And it's like, he needs a why in doing something. And so I think for all of those out there who are listening, grief shows up on our doorstep just because it's 5 degrees outside and maybe we can't get to work or get to the grocery store or go see our favorite, person down the road. We grieve over just about everything. And sometimes we allow that grief to keep building and it turns into deep depression.
Maybe we need to discuss in the future podcast the various degrees of grief.
There are.
Yeah.
And that's why the 3 of you and Candace, I think, are so important in my life, because I know at any time I can reach out and ask a question or tell you how I'm feeling. I mean, Christy will tell you every once in a while I text her and I'll go, I can't handle this right now. Could you, do some PQ reps, or could you breathe for me? And she'll go, I'm on it. And I know that she's really not doing it, but that's okay. She heard.
Oh, I'm probably doing it.
Got your back.
I probably am.
I appreciate that. But it's the fact that I now can ask, I can be vulnerable. And, and there's no judgment. Or I'll, Candace is another one that, I'll throw something at her and I'll say, I know you're so busy and you really can't deal with this, but I just want you to know this, and then, I get a heart back from her. And it's like, okay, she heard. Those are the important things that we all need to do to, to take that step forward.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that grief taught me is how essential it is to give and receive love, especially to myself first. And grief really elevated that. In the busyness of life, love matters more than anything else.
And how do you find that happy place when you need it? What is it? Is it listening to music? Is it getting a massage? Is it taking a walk? How do you just go into that Zen moment? Is it meditating? Is it yoga? But what do you do for yourself when you know you are reaching a tipping point and you're having a hard time coping? And again, it's getting to know yourself and loving yourself and knowing your boundaries, taking care of yourself.
When I became a grief recovery method specialist, I didn't understand that it might be important for me to take some time off during those periods of my life that are heightened, like loss anniversaries.
Mhm.
And my 2 months that are just the hardest are November and December. So it took me a little while to realize I have to take November. I just take November and December off, because working with clients who are grieving while at the same time trying to manage my own, you, and as anybody who has ever grieved knows, you never know when this is going to pop up and you're suddenly just crying and you weren't expecting to. And I finally realized, okay, November, December, I take off. I do not see clients during November and December. Unless somebody is really, really desperate, I will. But basically I don't, because I just finally realized, it took me a little while to get it. I'm like, okay, I just need to not do November and December. And it has made a world of difference to do that.
You've learned how to nurture yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the ebb and flow of energy. So, you know, while I was frantic about finding a new home, I had no capacity to talk to people even. And, you know, I had a friend who reached out and she said, you know, my mom just died and I've got a lot of stuff coming up, and she just wanted to talk to me, but I didn't even call her back because I had nothing myself.
I think I've shared this before when I was first going through this, and many friends were saying, let's get together. I want to take you. I want to do this. And all I could say to them was, I hope you'll be there when I'm ready. Because right now, I want nothing. I want nothing in the world right now. I just need to be in this dark place for however long I need to be here before I can start breathing again. But I hope you will be there when I start to breathe again.
Well, and I hope people understand when we don't respond and give us, some room. It's okay if you want to, every once in a while, touch base and say, are you okay? And if I still don't respond, know that maybe this is not my typical behavior, but just give me the space. And if it goes on too long, there is somebody that we can connect with to make sure that person is okay. But
But it's also okay to say, please give me this space. I will reach out.
exactly. But I know that there have been times in my life that I felt that I had to respond to everybody. And, it's now I'm not that way. I had somebody who reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, and they claimed they had, 3 people that wanted coaching with me and everything else. And I said, I will be back to coaching mid-January. I will contact you then. And just kept getting bombarded, but they want it now, they want it now. I sort of had learned from Christy and Candace that sometimes you're not ready to be in that mode, whether it be coaching, podcasting, going out to dinner with friends. And if you're not there, please don't do it. Take the time that you need. And, if these 3 people who supposedly want to be my clients, that's great. I'm in a better place now than I was when you wanted me there. But if it's not the right time for you now, that's okay. I can understand that. And I think we all have to be there for each other. We have to understand that we all have different timetables.
I think this has been really helpful for me. And I tell it to clients and friends. But just because a lot of times we don't know how to handle somebody else who's grieving. So I think one thing that's really helpful is when you have somebody who is really struggling or grieving, just to send them a message and just say, please don't feel the need to respond to this message. I just want you to know that I'm here. And that's it. And then most of the time they respond, but if they don't feel like it, they don't. And I love that. I mean, I love that they're taking care of themselves, but that is a really good message to send to somebody who you care about, who's grieving. Just, add that little thing, don't feel the need to respond to this, because they just might not be able to, just might be too much.
Absolutely.
Or to let them know when they are ready, you are there for them.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank the three of you for being here today and sending our love to Candace, who is extremely busy, but we know she'll be back. And, you know, I know this was going to be about me, but I wanted it to be about all of us today, because we all came to this group for our own personal reasons. And I think every time you each host a show, you bring something extra into it. And I just can't thank you enough. And hopefully 2024 is going to be a good year for us, that will be healthy and find happiness. And Allison will finally get settled in her new place. I can see that look on her face, like, I'm there, but and we'll be back again next month.
And
So
Karen, thank you. Thank you for being the common thread that has pulled us all together,
thank
and
you.
for sharing with us today how you got here.
Take care, everybody. Talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.